I'd like to begin this evening with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the United States of America is a settler colonial state that has embraced the erasure of the original peoples of the land through the violence of resource extraction, environmental desecration, land theft, displacement, family separation, and genocide. It is important to acknowledge the through line of settler colonialism here on Turtle Island and around the world, and its continuing impact on the land that Indigenous peoples have stewarded it for more than 12,000 years. We have benefited from that system. We live in the richest country that has ever existed in the history of the world, a society made wealthy by the genociding of people and the theft of their lands, a society that built its wealth upon the backs of enslaved Africans and continues to enslave Black and Brown people in the modern day carceral state. We say the land acknowledgement to center an opportunity to reflect, unlearn, decolonize, and grapple with these truths and put the wisdom that we've earned into work. Assalamu alaikum, hello, good evening, and welcome. Juneteenth marks the day in 1865 when federal troops arrived in Texas to announce that all enslaved people were freed. The holiday, which became known as Juneteenth, is called Juneteenth Independence Day, Freedom Day, or Emancipation Day, and it became a federal holiday due to the work of activist Opal Lee, the grandmother of Juneteenth, who set out in 2016 to make Juneteenth a federal holiday by walking from her home in Fort Worth, Texas, to Washington, D.C. During Opal's walk for freedom, she walked 2.5 miles each day to represent the amount of time it took for the news of Black liberation to reach Black Americans in Texas. Juneteenth became a federal holiday in 2021. This Juneteenth, we honor the incredible contributions of 5 Black activists. We will hear from Marsha Coleman Adebayo, Minister Khalif Moabel, Sherman Wells, Zaki Baroudi, and Sabi Sabs. If time allows, our presenters will engage in a Juneteenth discussion. My name is Kelly Merrill, and I have the great privilege of serving as a deputy campaign manager for presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein. And one of the most powerful aspects of that work is getting to meet the incredible activists around the country who are doing the work of Black, Palestinian, and Indigenous liberation and sovereignty. But first, I'd like to introduce our host for the evening. She is a fierce defender of human rights and the rights of the planet. She is a comrade, mentor, and one of the most courageous truth tellers I know. It is my honor to turn it over to one of the great leaders of the resistance, Green Party presumptive nominee and presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you so very much, Kelly. It's such an honor to have you on our team, leading the charge. And it's equally really wonderful to have all of you on the call tonight, both celebrating Juneteenth and really using this as a really key critical opportunity to focus on the work not done, on the ongoing struggle for justice and true Black liberation, in the same way that Juneteenth marks, a delayed, the delayed news of emancipation to Texas. There's been continuing an extraordinary delay in the actual delivery of justice and true liberation. And just to note that while, the Emancipation Proclamation took place, there's been really an ongoing legacy of the era of enslavement, from lynching and Jim Crow and Reconstruction, which was denied, 40 acres and a mule, which was essentially rescinded shortly after it was offered, continuing redlining, mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, the war on drugs, which was very much a war and still is a war on the African-American community, and the horrific disparities in the criminal injustice system, and the the leaders, activists, incredible powerhouse human beings who are joining us on the call tonight really exemplify the inspired ongoing work. And we are so grateful for the work that you do and for you to be in association with our work together. Much of it, being political at the local level as well as political at the larger level. And by political, I mean essentially challenging power as an essential dimension of the struggle for liberation. So I'm going to say not very much more than that because our speakers tonight are carrying the ball for us. And I see that Marcia Coleman Adebayo is with us. Marcia, are you good to go? There you are. Thank you so much for taking the time. Marcia Coleman Adebayo was previously a senior policy analyst for the US EPA, and she basically sacrificed her career at the EPA in order to speak out against chemical heavy metal poisoning in South Africa. And she did this against incredible resistance and kept pushing on behalf of the community in South Africa. And it's so, it's a tribute to Marcia's determination and her incredible integrity that she was not going to be shut down. She went on then to, in spite of incredible harassment and retribution that she experienced. She then went on to write a book called No Fear, A Whistleblower's Triumph Over Corruption and Retaliation at the EPA. And that story of corruption and retaliation is repeated across really virtually all sectors of our government and, is an ongoing struggle within the EPA, I must say, as well as most other agencies. She has helped lead the charge against racial discrimination and whistleblower retaliation. She serves on the board of directors now of the National Whistleblower Center, a nonpartisan nonprofit advocacy group dedicated to protecting the rights of employee whistleblowers. And she won an award from Good Housekeeping in 2003. With their Women in Government Award. She's also president of the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition and is a key player in a fight to protect one of the most significant African cemeteries in the world, the Moses African Cemetery, which is one of the largest graves and one of the most endangered historic sites in the United States. So she continues to carry on this fight to protect this sacred space for the African-American community and really to be fighting for justice in virtually all dimensions of her life and the community life. So thank you, Marcia. Take it away. And again, thank you so very much for your work and for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Jill. It's an honor to be here. And it's an honor to support your your presumptive presidential candidacy and nomination. And certainly I'm going to be one of your biggest supporters. So please feel free to call upon me and my supporters here in the Washington, D.C. area anytime. So as you said, we are fighting here in Bethesda. It's a fight that's been going on since we arrived in this country. And one of the goals of the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition is to raise consciousness nationwide about this amazing and this disturbing land grab that the United States government is engaged in, which is coming it's morphing into, it sounds as though we're really focused, and I think some people really are focused on the cemetery issue, but there are a number of us who are focused on the issue of land grabbing by the United States government and their allies in the developer community. And that means, displacing Black communities. It means gentrification of Black communities. It is certainly a form of terrorism that is going on, domestic terrorism that is going on in the Black community. When you see the breadth of how many areas of Black land are being usurped by the United States government through their allies in the developer industrial complex. And communities are feeling disempowered. They're feeling as though no one quite understands this particular struggle, this internal struggle of the insecurity that comes with not knowing where your mother and father are buried, or having them, as in the example of the Bethesda situation, where the county provides a permit to a developer to come in and literally dig up thousands of graves and take them to a landfill where they're literally crushed and smashed in front of the faces of the community. And that's the reason why I call it domestic terrorism, because if it were happening in any other country, Serbia, Palestine, this would be considered an act of war, an act of terrorism. Yet in this country, it barely makes the evening news. So the Bethesda Cemetery itself, Moses African Cemetery, is a 18th century cemetery. It has some very unique features. It's what we consider a South-South cemetery. It contains, or it did contain, the remains of the first generation of Africans who were kidnapped and brought to this country. They were, called slaves, I suppose, although that's a Slavic word. But for them, I think in terms of their own consciousness, they saw themselves as warriors. And certainly they performed as warriors. Yesterday, we had a very interesting program where we featured Civil War reenactors from the colored troops. And one of the messages that they kept repeating over and over again is that no one freed us. We freed ourselves. The abolitionists didn't free us. Abraham Lincoln didn't free us. Black soldiers took the musket, they took the guns, and they freed themselves. And so it's a message that I think is so important for the Black community, that we are not without resources, that in fact we were the agent of our own liberation. And that's some of the stories that I think are very important for the ruling class to deny and suppress within the Black community. And that is the agency of Black people taking their freedom in their own hands and making the determination that they're going to be free with or without allies. So this is also the area of the country where the quote unquote sexual violence or the breeding industry was so prominent after 1807, when tobacco began, the prices for tobacco waned, and in fact the agricultural productivity of tobacco waned. In the area that I live in, a lot of the plantations were turned into sexual violence centers. And so these kidnapped African girls, we now know from our research, as early as 5 years old, were being captured into this industry and literally rented out on the weekends for gentlemen's parties. One should not be surprised, perhaps, because Harriet Tubman was rented out at 6 years old to an overseer and his family. And so when she talks about the plight of African women, she's talking about something that she's very aware of, and something that affected her early lives. One of the heroes that we've highlighted during Juneteenth this year was a private named William H. Brown. He was a colored soldier in the Union Army. He fought valiantly at the Battle of the Crater, which was one of the most violent and vile battles in the Civil War, where when the Union troops had to surrender to the Confederacy, the Union troops, many of whom actually took their guns and started shooting Black Union soldiers in order to send a message to the Confederacy that they were not in league with African soldiers or with the colored troops. He didn't die in the Battle of the Crater. And also he was a part of the Overland Campaign. And as you know, that turned the tide of the Civil War from the Confederacy to the Union. He survived both of those battles. But what he didn't survive was the hatred in Montgomery County, Maryland. And when Private Brown died, he also was buried in Moses Cemetery. And with a permit from Montgomery County, Maryland, he was dismembered and his body was scattered throughout what we now call Moses African Cemetery. So these are some of the stories that we are educating our community about, and we're asking our community to fight. Montgomery County has now poured cement on 90% of our cemetery. It looks like a skating rink, and you would never know that there are thousands of African people lying beneath the concrete. So it has become a rallying point for this community. And I just left another Juneteenth program around Moses Cemetery, where we had, hundreds of people there, sort of rallying and talking about how we organize against the Democrats. And by the way, Montgomery County is a Democratic stronghold. I'm not talking about a county that exists within Birmingham, Alabama, or, a Tuskegee or Selma. This is like one of the wealthiest communities in the United States. And the area that I'm talking about, the land that I'm talking about is worth probably $100 million that was stolen from the indigenous African community on River Road. And it was, again, stolen by this very interesting collusion between the KKK and Montgomery County Police. And so we still see this sort of white supremacist underlining much of the policy framework. So we celebrated Ma'afa, which means the genocide, yesterday of our people. And today we talked about Private William H. Brown. We are so determined to fight for this land and for the intergenerational wealth that this land represents. Where the Whole Foods is located now, which was a farm by a member of our community. Every inch of land in Bethesda is considered very, very pricey and very important. So I think I'll end there by saying the desecration of African cemeteries is a war crime, and it's a form of domestic terrorism. And that, we're so happy that the Green Party has made this issue a part of this national platform, and that you're going to fight with us and fight with other communities around the country to stop this kind of domestic terrorism.
Thank you so very much, Marcia. So much wisdom in your story, in your work, and so incredibly relevant to struggles on many fronts for liberation. You're talking about the destruction of cemeteries as a war crime, reminds me that this is exactly what's going on in Gaza right now, where without reason, without provocation, that the Israeli occupation forces are targeting cemeteries and destroying them for absolutely no reason other than, simply, genocide against a culture, cultural genocide, and, the erasure, cultural erasure, historical erasure. And the stories that you are telling are so powerful and important and empowering. In the comments, people are suggesting, is this written up as some kind of a book? Is this available somewhere? Because it is so powerful and profound. And thank you so much for compiling this really important history that represents an ongoing struggle, in the same way that displacement and land grabs are, gentrification and, displacement is the name of the game. And it has happened over and over and over again to the African-American community. And, we're just so appreciative of your struggle, your vision, your inspiration, and, the ongoing fight. And we really look forward to helping, shine a light on this very inspiring and important struggle. And thank you for being a part of this and sharing your work.
Thank you so much.
More to come. Thank you, Marcia. Very
Thank
good.
you.
And we're going to turn now to Minister Khalif. Minister Khalif Moab El was the youngest child in the state of Wisconsin to go directly to an adult prison at the age of 15. And he spent 15 years of his life in an adult prison, including 10 years in solitary confinement, which is, also just an incredible crime, considered a form of torture by the United Nations. And its impact on a child is just unthinkable. Inspired by the impact of his experience, his career has been focused on mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, police involved injustice, racial inequality, and violence prevention. Minister Moab El has had incredible successes since his release. He's a motivational speaker. He's given countless seminars, lectures, and speeches all over the country and at schools and campuses. He's a peer specialist, a paralegal, and a licensed and certified spiritual teacher of many traditions who's been featured in many magazines, newspapers, TV talk shows, and so on. And he was also a DJ and talk show host at Wart Radio for 5 years, and has actually been the subject of several dissertations, and named as one of the top 48 most influential African Americans in the state of Wisconsin. And his focus so clearly is on uplifting his community. He helped start and build over 30 organizations, businesses, and nonprofits, and has mentored over 2,400 youth in his career and served over 2,000 men and women in reentering society. And he's also been a courtroom advocate and a legal advisor to public defenders. And he's had a huge success rate in keeping his clients in the community to become positive and productive citizens after involvement with the legal system. So he's a member of Ex-Prisoners Organizing and helped launch the Focused Interruption Coalition, which successfully gained a pledge of $3 million in support for the coalition's 15-point plan. He's also president of All of Us or None Wisconsin, which is a grassroots effort geared towards decarcerating Wisconsin and dismantling the school to prison pipeline and ending police-involved injustice. He's also co-founder and executive director of Breaking Barriers Mentoring and the Kenosha Coalition Organizing Resolution, which is a violence prevention initiative. And he's also one of the lead organizers of Circles of Support and leadership circles in Milwaukee. So as you can see, he has a really vast and powerful experience in really critical areas of need, particularly in frontline communities that are most abused by our legal and criminal injustice system. So thank you so very much, Minister Khalif, for being with us tonight and sharing some of your experience. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Jill. I appreciate you, and I support you 1,000% because I love your value system. And I definitely appreciate the sister that went before me, Sister Marcia, brought something very, very important to the light that no one knows about, because I'm blown away. So thank you for that knowledge and wisdom. And it's something that I'm going to implement in some of my talks with some of my people. So today is Juneteenth, and I went to the Juneteenth parade, and we had over 100,000 people there. Maybe I want to say that the demographics there was about 99% so-called Black people. And I just kept I couldn't help asking myself, okay, these people are here 100,000 strong, but how long will that hold? It'll be just for the time of the parade, and then we would all be divided again. And it made me reflect on this process of where we are today with the Juneteenth thing. I don't see it as a celebration. I see it more so as a mourning for me. I appreciate the holiday itself because of the struggle behind the history of the holiday. But as far as where we are now as a people, I have to say that we are mourning. We are mourning Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, you know, Marcus Garvey, Noble Drew Ali, all of these particular great people, Huey P. Newton, the people that came before us that wanted to bring equality, racial equality, and eliminate racial injustice. I wanted to ask every person that walked there when they saw me with my retired slave shirt on, and the many people walked up to me and saw this shirt and they asked me, what does that mean, retired slave? It means that I'm done with the system and I've been liberated from the system as it stands. But as far as the system as it goes and the way it is now, I am still under attack. Every single Black man, woman, child, etc. in this country is still under attack. We have never been freed. These things were lies. There was never been an Emancipation Proclamation. And I'm looking at how, when I came home from prison at 30 years old, I came home to very limited resources. Excuse me. I came home to very limited resources. And I was thinking about the so-called slaves, and the sister made a good point that the word slave is a Slavic word. We are not Russian people. Although our people definitely preserve the Russian language, we are not Russians. So we're not Slavs, but they refer to us as slaves. And one of the things about the people who were on the plantation is when they left the plantation, where would they go? Well, the government denied every single resources that could potentially allow them the ability to successfully transition into a modern society that they had no knowledge of. So where did they go? In lieu of providing us with the resources, they created laws to further captivate us and put us further in slavery, like vagrancy laws, literacy laws, laws like that, that created the epidemic that we have today called mass incarceration. So these things, when I think about these things, and I also think about how the slave owners, out of 1,000 slaves on a plantation, they would free one slave every year. They would free them every year. And the only way they would free these slaves is if they turned against their own people, created the animosity, told who was thinking about running away, told these particular things. These slaves created a mentality and a culture inside of the plantation where division would perpetuate post-slavery. So I'm looking at how in 1964, they were talking about how we were supposed to get civil rights. And there was a big civil rights movement. And everybody was participatory in the civil rights movement. But I always ask myself this question: if we have the Bill of Rights and we have constitutional liberties, if they are saying people are free, what is the purpose of the reconstruction of the Constitution? I never understood why we needed a 13th Amendment if all of us were created equal, if we were free. That never made sense to me until I started to understand and delve deeper into the word civil. And I realized that the word civil actually go back to civilis, which means dead. It doesn't actually mean that that is a right. It's more so of a privilege. That's why they're always being infringed upon. Our rights are very limited. And the reconstruction of the Constitution never allows us to really get grounding in this country as a people. So when we talk about mass incarceration, we look at all of the political dynamics that force that system and feeds it continually. It perpetuates us into a vicious cycle of slavery. We are in 2024 and we're still talking about slavery. How is it that all of these years later, we are still talking about the same thing, the same problem by a different name? They've come into many different forms. We have poverty. Poverty is one form of slavery also. Racial injustice is another form of poverty, is another form of slavery as well. Deprivation of rights and civil liberties, all of those particular things are forms of slavery. More importantly, the mentality that was created as a culture in the mind of every single person that had to undergo those circumstances. And I say ashe to all of the ancestors who had to endure those long periods of duration that they felt like there was no point of return and that there was no hope. Well, today they give us a false sense of hope. And in that false sense of hope, we start to follow and fall in line with the systems. But we are still divided as a people. And for me, that is very heartbreaking. When I was on the inside, I was in solitary confinement for 10 years. And I was in the worst prison in the country. The worst prison in the country. And they tortured us regularly. They took our food. They made us, they stripped us. They made us parade around naked, things like that. People died. People hung themselves. People were committing suicide on a daily basis. But the thing was that what they kept letting us know was that we were not human. We were not human. Why is it that the United States don't allow the institution of the Human Rights Constitution? Because they want to still keep people slaves. They don't agree with the Human Rights Constitution. Why? Because their constitution is better than human rights? For me, in order to respect us as a people, you must first see us as human beings, especially since we are the pioneers of every culture, every trend, everything that we see today in this country and all across the country and the world abroad. My thing is unity is the call of the day. Like-minded people, it doesn't matter the race, creed, or culture, like-minded people are the people who will be able to turn these things around. And right now we are in a very hard election. This election is forcing us to choose between the lesser of the two evils. What is that? I don't know what that means. If a person killed 1,000 people versus 1 million people, they're both murderers. So I don't see how we can accept someone coming into leadership and saying that they're going to move us in a different direction when they have murder on their mind, when they don't see us as human beings, when they don't see and they don't believe in anything but the bottom line. And the main thing is that every one of us is chattel property. After a certain period of time, everybody is slaves of the 14th Amendment. The 13th Amendment has a provisional clause that says, unless duly convicted of a crime. Okay, if we are slaves after we commit a crime and duly convicted, then what is Donald Trump? You see that? But nobody would ever say that he is a slave also. But according to the 13th Amendment, if you've been duly convicted of a crime, you are still a slave legally. You can be treated as a slave. You can be treated as second-class human being, and you can be locked into a caste state. So when I think about the reflection of this day, and Juneteenth, and everyone comes out and we have the big celebration, I have to mourn the loss of so many lives that have been taken away from us, so many families that have been destroyed, so many people that are continually being destroyed and still victims of the same governmental plot. It is time for us to have a new day. We have to have a new day. We've been under the dark cloud since the inception of the colonialism in this country, and we are continually perpetuating colonial systems. And we have, as a people, because it's been forced on us so much, we have become participants in that, and so much so forth that I have to fight with many people not to be a slave in their minds anymore. No one wants to hear the truth. They want to hear what's on the social media, the news, and things like that. But real things that's going on, that's affecting your life on a daily basis, these things we want to put to the side, and we rather be entertained as opposed to educated. And it's a lot of things that we must educate ourselves about, because we've been told so many lies. There are so many things underneath the surface that we don't know about. As our sister Marsha told us and educated us today, there is another form of genocide going on past mass incarceration, past police involved in justice, in all of these particular things. And these things are being swept under the rug, and they ensure our ignorance because they don't give it airplay on these particular sites, these entertainment platforms, news, radio, things like that. They bury what they want to bury, and they shape our realities. And this is why we must free ourselves mentally from the colonial mindset, so that we will be able to see things more clearly and not be under the disguise of what we call the American dream. We are still dreaming, and we do need to wake up. That's the main thing, and that's my piece.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much, Minister Khalif. What an honor to be able to hear you letting loose and sharing the breadth of your vision. It's really powerful. From meeting you in the course of fighting our battles to get on the ballot and to mobilize communities, it's really been such an honor. I should mention that Minister Khalif is very much a part of our fight to get on the ballot and hold empire and oligarchy and colonialism accountable, and to challenge it across the country in all states. And to have a chance to actually hear you share the breadth of your vision is really incredible and inspiring. Your words are so true. While this is considered a holiday, it is so much very much a day of mourning. It's a very bittersweet holiday. It's a holiday that marks the incredible tragedy of continuing colonialism, enslavement in another way, through all the institutions that continue to deny justice and equality and just human decency to the African American community. And one sign of that is the fact that the rates of poverty and economic subjugation really are not different now than they were in the 1960s. Where is all this progress, this post-racial society that we're supposed to be in? There's actually no evidence of it whatsoever. We are really as segregated and as full of crushing disparities as ever, one of them being health disparities. The last time I had occasion to actually look up these numbers, they were along the lines of 2 to 3 years taken off the life of the average African American compared to, to average white people. And then when you add to that the compounding disadvantage of inadequate education and disinvestment in schools and denial really of adequate education, the disparity grows from 2 to 3 years to more like 10 years taken off the average lifespan of the African Americans. So this is a state of absolutely tragic injustice, and there's so much educating to be done and so much power to be had. And as Minister Khalif notes, this is about building a broad coalition, a unified front here that brings together so many communities of struggle, whether it's students, elders, indigenous people, African Americans, immigrants, the Arab American community, and so on. When you begin to put us together, we have absolutely unstoppable power. And I'm so grateful for the amazing work that you've been doing. It's great to be hearing more about it. And I look forward to continuing to work together to really change the terms of the struggle here. It's gone on long enough. It's an illusion that this is getting better. And it's a really great time to be standing up, because there are so many people who are just done being thrown under the bus. So again, thank you so very much, Minister. And I look forward to continuing the discussion here. So now,
want to weigh in with Sabby and see whether we can change the order?
Sure.
Great.
Do you want to bring Savvy on now?
Yeah, as long as nobody else minds. Sherman, is that okay with you? Saki, is that all right with you? I can't see.
Yes, it's all right with me.
All right, great.
Great.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. All right. Terrific. And thank you so much, Sabby, for being here tonight. I think many of us know Sabby to be this rising powerhouse of independent media that she is and that she's becoming. She's an educator, an activist, a content creator, and an absolutely fearless journalist who just tells it like it is and challenges power in the way that we have to. We've become accustomed to lapdog journalism. We need watchdog journalism, and Sabby really represents the best of that. She actually grew up in Germany, saw many of the benefits of leftist policies. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of South Carolina, a Master's of Education from Northeastern University. She worked in higher education for 10 years as an academic advisor at colleges from MIT to Boston University. And now she's a host and a journalist with the Revolutionary Blackout Network, who's been live streaming on YouTube since early in 2021. And she hosts the popular Savvy Sabs podcast that looks at current events through a leftist perspective and conducts provocative interviews with newsmakers and change agents across the board. And she has advocated for ballot initiatives, for Medicare for all, for ending U.S. imperialism, for reparations, opposing censorship, and on behalf of the Green New Deal. She was a former supporter of Bernie Sanders and the Squad. She was disappointed with the Squad's failure to fight back against establishment Democrats. She then left the Democratic Party and became a registered independent to focus on other solutions like ballot initiatives, mutual aid, and third parties. And she continues to encourage her viewers to focus on local organizing and breaking the duopoly. And she's just covered a host of wonderful interviews that I won't take the time to list now, but definitely worth watching and supporting that that podcast. I was going to say that sobcast. I guess it's sort of a sobcast. There's a new nickname for you. So take it away, Savvy. Really great to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much, Jill. So I want to start off by saying one thing in particular. When we talk about Juneteenth, we have to remember that this is a federal holiday that was awarded to descendants of slavery instead of the U.S. government paying us reparations. And we always have to remember that this is more so crumbs. This is not the full repair that we are owed. And I want to go through a little bit of history, if that is okay with everyone. When we talk about who has received repair, particularly even in the United States here, we have to remember that Japanese Americans received reparations, those that were part of the internment camps. Not only did they receive reparations, but their descendants also received cash reparations. Now, that was approved under President Ronald Reagan, a conservative president. Imagine that. Holocaust survivors have also received reparations from Germany, but also under Barack Obama and also recently under Governor Hochul. So I think we're not here to say that those groups are not deserving of reparations. They absolutely are. But what I have noticed over the years is that whenever this discussion is brought up about descendants of slavery, the response from our politicians is always the same. Well, we need to look into that, or we can do a study about it. And when you hear those talking points, I think it's very important that you push back with the study and the research has already been done. Dr. Sandy Darity has done a lot of research about reparations, how much is owed to descendants of slavery. He wrote a whole book about this, and I encourage people to check out some of his work, as well as Yvette Carnell, as well as Tone Talks, as well as other reparations activists as well. A couple of days ago, victims of the Tulsa massacre, survivors that are still alive today, it was announced that the Oklahoma Supreme Court dismissed their claim for reparations. Now, this is something that they were rightfully owed. One of the pushbacks that we get for reparations for descendants of slavery is that the government can't award you repair because the people that were affected are no longer alive today. Well, this is a situation where survivors were present and the case was dismissed. It appears to me that it is only one group in particular that our government does not want to give this repair to. I just gave you other examples where repair was given to other groups. So it was really sad to see that these survivors were told that they're not owed this repair. And what was even more sad to hear about this was a national story. And what was upsetting for me is I noticed that many of my comrades in left independent media didn't even talk about this story. So it's very apparent to me that when it comes to descendants of slavery, we're not even first of mind when it comes to leftists. So these are things we have to acknowledge. We go through a little bit more of the history, and I want to talk about how people have been replaced. Some of the neighborhoods that you may have visited in this country once were Black neighborhoods. If you live in Boston, you go to Beacon Hill. Believe it or not, it's very hoity-toity now. But Beacon Hill, once upon a time, was a Black neighborhood. Now Black people can't even afford to live in Beacon Hill. Central Park, a lot of tourists love to visit when they come to New York City. Central Park was once Seneca Village. That was an all-Black neighborhood. What happened to those people? What happened to their homes? And then we also have to think about Levittown, New York. This is one I think a lot of people are not aware of. I want to read you something from Levittown's restrictive racial covenant read. The tenant agrees not to permit the premises to be used or occupied by any person other than members of the Caucasian race, but the employment and maintenance of other than Caucasian domestic servants shall be permitted. There is a dark history about Levittown, New York. Now, this is something I believe the town they've tried to change over the years, but this is another example where Black people were kept out of home ownership or Black people were pushed out. This isn't during slavery. This is after. And that leads me to FDR's New Deal and redlining. There's nothing more disturbing to me when I hear someone say that they are an FDR Democrat. What does that really mean? Let's talk about that. In 1934, FDR established the New Deal, a series of programs aimed at economic recovery during the Great Depression. Two of the programs focused on increasing home ownership by, number one, ensuring home loans, and number two, financially supporting the development of new suburban neighborhoods. Here's the problem. Those home loans issued through the Federal Housing Act, the FHA, were generally only given to white home buyers. This is what resulted in redlining. So every time you hear people say that they just want an FDR Democrat, ask them, what do you mean by that? That means that they're willing to overlook how some of the New Deal policies affected the Black community. Communities with significant African-American populations were included in areas coded in red for high risk. Those maps inspired the term redlining, describing a policy of refusing to make federally insured mortgages in such areas. So essentially what you had happen, there were white families that were leaving the cities and they were moving into those suburban neighborhoods. Black families, even the Black families that did have the money to do so, were not issued the loans from the banks to move into those suburban areas. Thus, they were left in the cities. The families that left the cities, when they left, the wealth that they had went with them. So since public schools are funded by property taxes, now the public schools in the inner cities are now under-resourced and underfunded. And that is still an issue today. That has not changed. It is 2024, but we have to remember we still have a lot of segregation in this country. It may not be under Jim Crow anymore, but there are other factors. There are mortgage issues. There are realtors that will not show houses in certain neighborhoods to Black people who are trying to buy a home. There are ways that Black people have been kept out. Now, this leads to the class and the race and the identity discussion, because I think what we have to start doing when people tell you, don't talk about race, just focus on class, that means that they are excluding people like me. Most Black people are a part of the working class. So class and race is intersected. It is intertwined. You cannot separate the two. But essentially, You also have to remember that class is also an identity. So when people say don't talk about race, that's identity politics, just focus on class, I want to tell you that class is also an identity. So what they are actually saying to you is that they don't want to hear about the struggles that descendants of slaves have in this country because they don't want to have to deal with that, because that may mean that they have to acknowledge some of their own bigotry or some of the bigotry that they have within their family or with their friends. We cannot continue to just accept that. When you accept that, you are hiding everything that I just told you. These things have to be talked about. One of the things I will say that I do appreciate about Jill's campaign, Jill Stein has a reparations policy on her platform, and it's very detailed. When you're thinking about who you're going to vote for in November, Joe Biden doesn't have a reparations plan. I think we all know Donald Trump doesn't have a reparations plan. The Democrats at best are going to tell you that we should study it. We should research this issue, but that has already been done. They're just kicking the ball down the field as long as they can. That is a stalling tactic. So you do have a choice in November. So for those of you who do want reparations, I encourage you to vote for a candidate that has a reparations platform. I think that's what everyone should be doing. I think the worst thing that you could do is sit at home. If you want reparations, I think the best thing, you have to vote for it, because the reality is, based on what I've seen from the two-party system, a Democrat president and a Republican president, they're not going to give you reparations. They're just not going to do it. So that's one of the things that I appreciate about Jill's campaign, and I really appreciate this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabby. Really great having you here, and so many good points that you've made. You know, that reparations is extended to other groups when you consider the incredibly long 500-year history of African enslavement and abuse. The fact that African Americans basically provided the basis for at least 50% of the US economy right up through the Civil War, that is through tobacco and cotton, as well as the labor and the sweat behind so much of all the construction and our Ivy League schools across the board. So much of what built this country was the blood, sweat, tears, and the power of the African-American enslaved people. And when you put those numbers all together, what the experts come up with is at least at least $12 trillion worth of a debt owed. So this is not like some, you know, and it's a debt owed for an injustice that continues. This is not over. You know, the legacy of redlining is that African Americans have not been able to accumulate family wealth. And, you know, the legacy of segregation and disinvestment in schools is, you know, the continued economic oppression of African Americans that have, on the whole, something like 10 to 15 cents on every dollar of wealth that the white community has accumulated. So this is injustice multiplied over centuries, injustice and enslavement. So cash reparations made available to descendants of African-American slaves is essential. But it's not sufficient either, because we need to reform the institutions that continue to carry on these very discriminatory policies. So thank you again so much for your wisdom and for all your work, Sabby, and we look forward to the continuing dialogue. Thank you so very much. Take care.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to introduce, let me find it here, get back to our sorry, I am looking again. Can someone just please remind me? I've lost my
Order? The
Google
order
Doc, my
here?
Google Doc. Yeah, can you
Oh.
just give me the Google Doc again?
Yeah.
So I can bring it up once more.
1 second.
If you can send that to me in the chat.
Okay, I'll do that right now, Jill.
Let's see. All right. I think Nada just got it. Thank you. All right, great. So sorry for the interruption. Just want to be sure that I'm doing justice to the incredible speakers that we have. So we're going to turn now to Sherman Wells, who I had the pleasure to meet at our trip to Omaha a few weeks back, Omaha, Nebraska. And Sherman is father, husband, born and raised in Omaha, founder of Untamed, and a member of the Black Agenda Alliance. And he's dedicated over 20 years to being a voice for the voiceless. He's had very close personal family experience of tragedy at the hands of police abuse. Maybe he'll reference that today. And he works in this, among his other projects with Untamed, is this 20 weeks of community engagement, which has been a cornerstone of support and empowerment for the residents of North Omaha. And he's focused on serving the poorest areas of North Omaha, providing meals and fostering connections among residents, addressing immediate needs while creating space for communal growth and support. And Untamed has been a beacon of hope and empowerment for the community. In addition, he's also brought business leaders into the community to offer practical insights and inspiration for community's members, and has really featured a diverse array of professions across the board. So through these various interactions, Sherman has helped showcase success stories and empowerment for the residents to keep pursuing dreams, equality, and demanding a future that they deserve. So thank you again so very much, Sherman, for making time for us tonight. Go ahead and take it.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate you, Jill, for having me on. And you know I'm going to be supporting you throughout this campaign. For one, because of your reparation package. And for two, we sat in that bar for a couple hours talking. And I appreciate the way that you stand with the people and for the people. That's exactly what we need. And when I seen that video of you standing there with those college students and the way they, mangled you up, I said we both would have been in jail that day, because I would have been all over them too, the same way. So thank you for having me on. I want to talk about what me and Kelly was kind of talking about yesterday when me and her was texting and talking about like the selection of presidents that we have now. And we started talking about lines where, it's public record that they found cocaine in the White House. And so, Joe Biden might be on a couple lines and Donald Trump is in line for jail. So we don't want neither one of them guys representing us when it comes to the American people. So Jill Stein for me is the vote. And I'm an independent, registered independent. And so in Omaha right now, Untamed, which stands for a unified nation, taking action, mentally erasing deception. And the deception that we're erasing is the deception that we can't be together. Even Brother Malcolm said, this is the birthplace of Malcolm X. And he said he's willing to work with anybody that's willing to face this miserable condition and change it. And so right now we have to look at all these people, the minister and all the people who's on this panel. We are the change. We can't keep sitting around waiting for somebody else to do something for us. And here in Omaha, one of my descendants, Vivian Strong, she was 14 years old, and she was shot in the back of the head by a police officer leaving just an apartment. They had like a little get together, and she was leaving, and the officer shot her in the back of the head. And so here in Omaha, that caused one of the worst race riots in history. And unfortunately, the people destroyed our business district. So instead of rebuilding the district, what they did is double down. They wouldn't give nobody loans. And still today, 2024, her murder happened in 1969. Mm-hmm. Still today in 2024, that business district is not rebuilt at all. We don't have a place where we can circulate our dollars, and that's on purpose, because we know what happens when Black people, the top spenders, circulate their dollars, right? It's going to be another Black Wall Street. So here we have the powers that be that's still suppressing the Black dollars. And also Nebraska is #1 for incarcerating young Black men. So with Untamed, with the Black Agenda Alliance, with North Omaha Community Partnership and the people that I work with, we focus on making sure we are revitalizing the hearts of the Black people. And so Juneteenth is about freedom, but freedom starts in your mind. You have to free your mind from this system, like the minister said, you know. And so here now, it's very important for people to understand that the change looks like change, but it's really no change. Because also in February 2nd, 2022, my cousin Amir was killed, murdered, executed in Minnesota by the hands of the Minneapolis SWAT team, right? Minnesota SWAT team, Minneapolis SWAT team. And 53 years apart, him, my 22-year-old cousin Amir, and my cousin Vivian, 14, 53 years apart, and still the same exact consequence. No officer charged. Actually, the officer with Vivian got to come back to the community and police right where he killed her at. And this officer that killed Amir, he actually got a promotion to detective. And so my cousin Karen Wells, who's in the chat, shouts out to her. She has been leading the way to make sure that we end no-knock search warrants, because what we found out when the Department of Justice did a study on the SWAT team, they determined that they were only using the no-knock search warrants on Black people for everything, because what they were wanting to do is hopefully they can catch us in there with a gun and shoot them, just like they executed my cousin Amir. And so now we are 100% dedicated to this movement. Amir had a thing where he started called Saving the Youth. And so through his energy, because he was born 11/11/99, he was murdered 2/2/22. That's our angel right now. So we're focused on what he was focused on before and after his death, which is the liberation of Black minds, making sure we have everything going as far as that's going to save the youth and get them out of this system that's already put in front of them through social media and this government programming, that being a Black person, you have to be this certain way, or being a Black woman, you have to be a certain way, or being a Black man, you have to be a certain way. We're not each other's enemies. We are the creators. And the problem is they've taken us away from our creative nature and put us into this savage nature based off the United States and what they say a Black person is supposed to be. So from here on out, we're not allowing that to happen, not here in Nebraska and not around the world as we travel and meet people like Jill and brother, the minister right here. And I'm gonna definitely be hooking up with my brother Zaki in St. Louis, because we have to not only keep talking about this, that way we can gain our spiritual family, but we have to keep being action orientated about this. Everything's about the action. And so, although I do appreciate Juneteenth and the recognition, but like the sister said, what does it really mean? What are we actually doing? Earlier today, they had a post on Revolt TV on Instagram, and they showed a whole bunch of Black people doing the electric slide. And I made a comment that why can't we get this many people to participate in the liberation or economic growth of Black people? And you know who I got the most kickback from? Other Black people. Because they felt like I'm saying, oh, we can't have fun. I didn't say we can't have fun. What I'm saying is we have to make sure we're putting that same energy into the things that matter to us. And unfortunately, the brainwash has been so strong that even when you are making a comment to help other Black people, you're getting a kickback from them. And here in Omaha, you know, we have a cabal of people, like, for instance, our mayor, our governor. We have been fighting against the unsanitary living conditions of our elders and low-income people. And so through that fight, our mayor actually says she won't step in unless people call her more often, although there's been over 30 news stories and these people showing their living conditions, which is crazy. And what they did is double down on me, the CEO of the Omaha Housing Authority, and ban me from being able to go in and talk to the residents and threaten to arrest me for trespassing, just because I was going in there talking to everybody and helping them with getting their story out, being the voice for the voiceless. They were afraid of retaliation. We can't sit here and allow elders and low-income people to be afraid to speak on unhealthy living conditions, from mold infecting their lungs to bed bugs biting their body, just because they're afraid to be kicked out. And there's actually a law that states they shouldn't be able to retaliate. But it don't hold true here, because the cabal of people is all in cahoots, from city council to the mayor to the governor, all these people, and then the Black faces in Black spaces that look like us, all they're doing is poverty pimping. So what they do is they get a nonprofit in a low income area, right? And then you write up these programs that you say is for the area, and then you collect federal dollars and use our poverty as a coupon to the federal government, but you never actually do nothing. And that's not just happening in Omaha, it's around the world. We're seeing this. So it's going to take people like us to speak forward, to get on platforms like this, to elect somebody like Jill to make sure that this stuff ends now. Because if we don't, what we're going to see is the future generation of lost zombie people with no hope of fighting forward. And we have to make sure we keep the fight. And that's why, you know, this shirt I'm wearing, they say, I'm from the hood. We talking about motherhood, fatherhood, sisterhood, brotherhood, parenthood, because it's the restoration of the village. Before it took a village, now it takes a hood. And this is the hood. We got to bring back the families, y'all. And if we can't get the families back together, then we're going to lose this war on this mental cycle of what they have pushed out for our children. So I'm just encouraging everybody on this live, anybody watching this, if you have a voice, it's your time to voice your voice. Don't sit back, because when you voice your voice, you are going to find your family, your spiritual family, your warrior family. Those are going to be the people who join up with you. One of my friends, Gary Ballard, he told me this Sunday, he said, you know, kinfolk is the people you're related to. Family is the people that show you love. And so I consider this panel my family, because not only are y'all showing me love, you show love to the other people around you. And this is what we have to do, because love is the only way. And like I say on this thing right here, it say unity is the only way we survive. And it's true. It's the only way. So what we got to make sure is we getting back to spreading our knowledge, spreading the way we think and the way we are on platforms, so other people can see it and they get the courage to come forward and talk about and be about and have action-orientated plans to move forward and moving the needle. And elected Jill, I think it's going to be the only way, because like I said, the other two options, they don't care about us. They only live in that moment, you know? So you'll have Donald Trump talking about, oh, the black people, I do this for black people. And if you ain't black, you don't vote for, if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you ain't black. That's all crap. Because at the end of the day, once they get elected, what are they actually doing for us? Nothing. Zero. So let's just stay focused, y'all. And I think, you know, if we can understand that the power is with the people, not the people who's elected in these positions that they think got power. It's always been power to the people. So thank you, Jill, for having me on. I love you. I appreciate you. Minister, I love you. I appreciate you, Kelly. You know, we're going to keep talking. And I'll be excited to be able to join your campaign on anytime you need me to come forward and come speak for you or with you. I got you, sister. It's all love.
All right. Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much, Sherman. So many beautiful things. And I think this is exactly what the oligarchy and the empire doesn't want to hear, because so many are being thrown under the bus right now. You know, poverty rates among children, which are, it's like 25% in the African-American community. It's just sky high. And the poverty rates among children doubled when, you know, like 2 years ago when they allowed the child tax deduction to expire. It had been increased during COVID, and then they allowed it to expire as though we don't have an emergency, you know, but we do have an emergency. You know, we have an emergency of Black health, Black wealth, Black lives, Black justice, Black abuse through the school to prison pipeline, the disinvestment in our schools. One of the policies that we call for, in fact, is equalizing funding for schools across the country, so that the quality of your schools is not dependent on, you know, on the value of your housing, because the need is actually inverse. You know, the lower the standard of the housing, the more the community really needs education and support. So that's one of the programs. You know, healthcare for everyone as a human right. You know, our basic, economic human rights agenda. You know, it benefits everybody, but especially it benefits people in greatest need. So it's of huge benefit. You know, we call for housing as a human right.
Right.
Expanding public housing. It's been so disinvested in over the last several decades, really, and allowed to deteriorate to where we have the conditions now that you're talking about, where you have, you know, mold, just really dilapidated conditions, humidity, bed bugs, you know, infestations. It's just outrageous, the kinds of conditions people are living in. And you have this very corrupt power structure that's, you know, essentially just invested in maintaining its power. So, you know, it's a badge of honor that they're trying to silence you, Sherman.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's a tribute to what a difference you make. And I too am so hopeful that we're at an incredible tipping point right now, because most people are done. They're just done being thrown under the bus by both parties. Pick your poison. Neither of these parties are helping people. We've had we've had really steady downward decline. Things are not advancing. Money and power are ever more concentrated into fewer and fewer hands. The lower 50% of the American population now has 2% of the wealth. What does that tell you? How people are surviving on just a pittance right now, and they're hardly surviving. So, we have work to do, but there's a lot of us that want to do it. And having you and the other folks that are on this panel tonight as voices that we can all help lift up, I'm really so excited. Once we get these ballot access battles behind us, and then we can really dive into, empowerment and challenge, and really helping to unify and lift up our communities and the fights in our communities, because your voice and all the voices here tonight are so incredibly powerful. It just makes me incredibly grateful and really proud that we can help be a vehicle to raise your voices and turn up the volume, because you're absolutely unstoppable and your message is just super powerful. So I look
Thank you,
forward to
Jen.
lots more. Sherman, thank you so much. Really
Please.
appreciate it.
Yes,
All right,
ma'am.
to be
Love you.
continued. Much
All right.
love. Thank you. And now, last but not least, we are jumping to Zaki Baruti. And I apologize that we've had so much to say tonight. We're running a little bit over, but we'll try to wrap up soon. Zaki is the President General of the Universal African Peoples Organization. He graduated from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, majoring in history, got a master's in education administration. He was an educator and a union activist for 33 years, authored 2 education booklets. He's a member of the Gateway Green Alliance and co-chair of the Community Justice Coalition, co-founder and president general of the Universal African Peoples Organization, former co-chair of the Coalition Against Police Violence and Repression. He's also the former political action chairperson of the East St. Louis chapter of the Black United Front, distributor of the Black Panther Party newspaper. He's traveled to over 35 countries around the world, met several heads of states, from Daniel Ortega to Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. He has run for office as a Democratic Party candidate for governor of Missouri way back in the 1980s, and a Green Party candidate in the year 2000. And he is the publisher of the quarterly newspaper, The African News World, and hosts the internet TV program Conversation with Zaki Baruti. So take it away, Zaki, and thank you again so much for all your wonderful work and sharing your wisdom here tonight. Let's see, we still have you muted, Zaki. Can you unmute? Great.
First of all, I'd like to extend several greetings. Assalamu alaikum, power to the people, and Black power. And I just want to salute you, Jill, for your great analysis of what is facing the people here in this country as well as throughout the world. And it's a no-brainer in terms of when we go to the polls as to anybody who's conscious of the issues should cast their vote for you. So I just salute the work that you're doing. As well as I'm just humbled by this powerful, distinguished panelist. And with everything that's already been said, I totally agree with what has already been said. And as relates to what Sabby said, as relates to Juneteenth, they are really crumbs. Although if we organize properly, as Sherman mentioned, as well as Brother Khalid and Sister Marsha, we have one thing before us as a people. As what Kwame Ture used to say, 3 things: organize, organize, organize. And it's the organization got to be for not just us here in this country, but actually for the world. because as the people in Iran used to chant death to, this country as Satan, if we look at the history of this country, it has been a very evil and satanic policy to the indigenous people here, to Black people, and through the people throughout the world. And to that end, its policy still is a policy of harm to the masses of people in this country, especially Black folks. And they do it through a lot of variety of ways. Culturally, like right now on Netflix, we're calling for a boycott of Netflix because they have done a reboot of Good Times, where they're projecting Black people in the most horrendous, foolish manner that they can be projected as buffoons, and as it relates to Black people in this reboot of Good Times. The baby coming out, a young baby coming out as a drug pusher. They got Black people having a relationship with roaches. That's something that, again, is reflective of the attack on us culturally. When we look at police violence, just most recently, just came across an article that this officer has been convicted, though, only a year, of making an inmate lick urine off the floor. We have a situation in Rankin County, Mississippi, where 6 officers called the Goon Squad terrorized 2 Black men in where they falsely raided their homes and then tortured them for hours, waterboarding them with grease, along with water, milk, had sex toys, and sexually assaulted them. Put a pistol in one of their mouths, played Russian roulette, and then finally shot them. This is the kind of sickness that's so pervasive in the police forces across this country, which I say the KKK went from the white robes to the blue robes personified as police officers. When we look at mass incarceration, our organization in the early 90s did a front page cover that said the United States is the jailhouse of the Black nation. And part of the statistics that we cited, that Black males constituted 5% of the United States population, but yet constituted 50% of those incarcerated. The disproportionateness of us being incarcerated is already a proven fact. When you look at the fact of the lack of, when they say this is a democracy, when you look at the fact of proper Black representation in this electoral process, when you look in, we are projected as 14% of the population, yet when you look at the United States Senate, out of 100 senators, only 4 are people of color, when it should be at least 14. When you look at the governorship, out of 50 governors, only 1 is Black, when ideally it should be 6. And on a conceptual level, of course, conscious people. When you look at the attack on the Uhuru movement, again, it's similar to the attack on the Black Panther Party during the 60s in terms of trying to incarcerate those who speak truth to power. And internationally, it's a damn shame, and it is criminal what is happening in Gaza. It is pure genocide. And how can people who project to be quote unquote Christians and what have you be able to vote for Genocide Joe in terms of his policies that has been an ongoing policy of this government to support the Zionist state of Israel? Also, when you look at what is the murder of one of the greatest crimes against Africa, as I see it, in which, by the way, I got an opportunity to meet Muammar Gaddafi, who was pushing for a United States of Africa, because a United States of Africa under the principles of socialism would be totally against the policies of this country, which this country do not want Africa to ever rise up. But we do have glimmers of, as well as the sanctions that's been, and the embargo against Cuba, as well as Zimbabwe. But in terms of the embargo against Cuba, each year for the last 20 plus years, when it comes before the United Nations body, everybody voted against the embargo with the exception of Israel and the United States. When you look at all that's happening, the challenge before us, any good-minded person that wants to see a difference, is that we have to, again, organize. As an organization, we say, as my brother Khalif had made mention, that we have to have like-minded people. Our organization is saying that, and we're challenging every organization that's out here, because we need some armies of righteous people. And we're saying that we need, for our organization, a army of 144,000 plus people that can be supportive of progressive-minded people such as Jill Stein. So bottom line is, in my humble opinion, out of the scripture, when it had, if we use the scripture on the positive side, the Holy Bible, when David went against Goliath, because we're dealing with a Goliath, and let's be real, a Goliath of power that don't give a damn about the lives of people. That we need to be able to slay that Goliath, cut that head off, which is reflective of imperialism and capitalism, so that the world will be free. And a starting step with that process is with the election of Jill Stein. So again, I simply say power to the people, liberation in our lifetime. And rather than, and I'm glad that we do have Juneteenth, but I look forward to the day that we can have a true day of liberation and freedom for Black people in this country and for the people of the world. That's when I would really, really be happy and embrace in the total sense. So again, the challenge for all of us that's on this line, that you got to stay true. Everybody needs to belong to an organization that speaks truth to power and has a track record of working to uplift people. So with that said, moving forward, liberation in our lifetime. God bless everyone.
Thank you so much, Zaki. Thank you for these beautiful words. And this summarizes, I think, what we're doing, what we're working on in this campaign, how we hope to lift up all the work on this panel. Your words, I think, kind of speak to the unifying themes here, that we are fighting for an America and a world that works for all of us, a world of equity and justice and peace and security for everyone, and an end to empire, an end to oligarchy. In Martin Luther King's words, militarism, materialism, and racism are part of a triple evil. And he also said, my country is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. And that was true in the 1960s. It's even more true now. And the poverty and injustice here in this country is matched really by the colonialism, the white supremacy, the imperialism of this empire around the world. And push comes to shove, when half of our congressional budget is now being spent on the endless war machine, which is basically creating havoc, disasters, climate catastrophe, environmental catastrophe, human rights catastrophes, and genocide, really all around the world. So we can fix this. You know, we must stop the impoverishment of American society through this war machine and instead turn these resources back to the people to be spent on the things that we need, including reparations for the horrific injustices of the past, and then the social programs and the reforms that we're calling for, an economic bill of rights, ending the crushing inequality, ending the power of the economic elites to really impoverish the rest of us. So it's not rocket science how to do this. It's all about what everyone has been talking about tonight, which is really coming together across the many frontline communities who are being thrown under the bus, ordinary working people right now included. And that means, you know, the 63% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, the 50% of Americans who cannot afford to pay their rent, who are one paycheck away from evictions, which are skyrocketing as homelessness is skyrocketing. The system is not working. It's in utter breakdown and meltdown. And there couldn't be a better time for unifying and for the power of the message that, Zaki, that you're summarizing here tonight. And I'm just so grateful to everyone here for being a part of this discussion. We've gone well over our time, so maybe we can come back in a second chapter here and have the more open-ended discussion, which we're really hoping to have. But tonight, I think, is a wonderful tribute to the power of this community, the power of these African-American leaders and visionaries who are speaking truth to power and who are empowering this community to lead the way forward to an America and a world that's going to work for all of us. So with that, I'm going to let us sign off only because some of us actually have another event, another previously scheduled event that we're going to have to run to. But I want to, again, just thank everyone so very much for being a part of this really powerful discussion. And I look forward to our continuing work together. Kelly, do you have any final remarks here? Having opened us up, do you want to close us out with any final words?
Just that it is truly, truly one of the greatest blessings of working on this campaign to get to meet every single one of you. Zaki met me outside the jail when Jill and Jason and I were assaulted and arrested. I've had wonderful hours of conversation with Sherman. I've had great conversations with Marcia, and so am captivated by her work and the work of everybody on this call. Sabby, the truth teller, just everybody here today. I've forgotten somebody.
Kelly, yeah.
Yes, Minister
Kelly, with whom we are continuing to work now in very serious, like, daily partnership. And it is such an honor to be
such
on
an
your team.
integral part of this team, and everybody here. Just thank you for your time and for the amazing work. We will all be following very, very closely and are so blessed to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.